Hello and welcome, Groovy Sound Searchers, to the Old Newspaper Plus podcast. I'm Courtney Lorraine, bringing you the old news. Hopefully, you were able to catch the first part of this two-part episode when I started with the Ott family. I told you guys a little bit about Miss Grace and a lot about her husband, Captain Alexander Ott, and their world-famous water sports shows. Alexander was a famous performer, director, and promoter of the water sports shows in Miami, Florida back in the 1920s. If you didn't catch that first episode though, no worries, you can always go check it out after this, because today I'm focused on Grace and Alexander's son, and he comes with a lot more stories and background for me to give to you. So before I jump into the articles for today, though, I want to mention a couple of notes in case you did miss the last episode or in case I was just unclear. Starting with the term casino, because this is part of the name of most of the locations where the Ott family lived and performed. Just to set the scene a little, I want to remind everyone that this is during the peak of prohibition and organized street crime. And although the historical websites for these cities will say that there was no gambling or drinking at these locations and these establishments, I find it very unlikely that that's true, personally. That's just my opinion, though. Just know that each of these locations, quote-unquote casinos, consisted of hotels, nightclubs, very large dance areas, stupidly huge pools, and incredibly wealthy people, along with a whole lot more depending on the location. So I personally picture scenes from The Great Gatsby, but maybe that's just me. First, I'll tell you about the city of Coral Gables, which is encompassed in the Miami area of Florida, and it's home to the Venetian swimming pool. It originally had an island in the pool, grottos, a waterfall, and the sunbathing platform, all in the pool. It was originally called the Venetian Swimming Casino, by the way. And this location is still in Miami, although the structure of the swimming area has been extremely altered throughout the years. This pool was large enough to canoe through while swimmers were still diving into the water and playing and swimming around you. I don't believe canoeing is permitted in this pool anymore, just so we're clear. It holds 820,000 gallons of fresh water that's fed naturally from artesian wells. And the pool's depths vary from 2 feet deep kiddie pools, and the rest of the pool staying between 4 and 8 feet deep. Now, the Biltmore Hotel in Miami, Florida, and anybody familiar with 1920s gangsters, or maybe one named Al Capone, might recognize the name of this location because, in fact, he was very fond of the Miami Biltmore and stayed there often, and he actually was personally friends with the Ott family. So there you go. All of these locations were actually a hotspot for big-time gangsters in the Roaring '20s, so always keep that in mind as well. The Miami Biltmore pool was also large enough to canoe through, while swimmers had plenty of space to play. At 23,000 square feet, it holds 600,000 gallons of water, and today is still the largest pool in the continental U.S. This pool also had a diving platform that stood 85 feet tall. No thank you. Me personally, I don't like to be above 5 feet off the ground. So next I'll tell you a little about the Roman pools in Miami, Florida. These were 2 massive twin pools that were both up to about 7 feet deep and filled with salt water that was fed to them straight from the ocean via a Dutch windmill. These pools had a diving platform that was around 45 feet tall, and although I'm not positive about the full dimensions of the pools, I do have pictures of this historic location to post. I will also post the sources of which I got these pictures along with the pictures on social media, so be on the lookout for that. That way also you guys can get an idea of how big it really was. Because this location was unfortunately demolished by the city following a really devastating fire that happened in the early 1960s. So, with those tidbits, dear sound searchers, hopefully you'll understand the setting of these articles and stuff a little bit better. Now, let's dive in, shall we? This first article was originally published by the Miami News of Miami, Florida, August 15th, 1957. And it reads, Aquatic shows world famous. Ott family boomed Gables. The Pioneers Week celebration in Coral Gables this week will recall to hundreds of South Florida oldsters the doings of the Ott family, one of the best known in the nation during the Roaring Twenties. Evidence of this can be found in 7 large scrapbooks filled with clippings from rotogravure, pictorial, and news pages from newspapers from all parts of the nation and some foreign countries. Doubtless, much more evidence has been destroyed, such as the newsreels shown during the periods when the Otts were staging their shows. Jackie Ott, star of the family and 6 years old at the time, was variously known in national and international swimming circles as the Pride of Miami. Alexander Ott, his father, was recognized by such leaders as George E. Merrick, John E. McEntee Bowman, Carl Bywar, Glenn H. Curtis, and others as the great promoter of his era. Mrs. Ott assisted them in all that they did. She was a familiar figure at all the shows. She screened entrants in the Miss Miami and Miss Florida contest and staged in connection with the shows, and saw to the domestic comforts of the family. Royal Palm heyday. Alexander Ott and family came to this area in its early days of development. He became connected with the Royal Palm Hotel in 1905. The hotel then, and for some years after, was Miami's largest and the gathering place for prominent visitors and residents. The pool was one of its main attractions. When Miami Beach began to blossom forth as a city, Ott became director of the Roman Pools, an attraction of its largest hotel, the Roni Plaza. Ott's promotional methods were becoming recognized. The beautiful Venetian casino, now the Venetian Pool, was drawing attention, so Ott joined George E. Merrick as the pool's director. But he saw it was unsafe and impractical. It had been built with an eye to beauty. He insisted on the island being removed and the rocks and other hazards to children eliminated. The designer objected, but Ott had his way. Grandstands were erected and it became both popular and profitable. Wooed by Curtis. Glenn H. Curtis, then developing Opelika, hailed to Ott one day as they passed in their automobiles. He asked him to see what he could do with the pool in that city. He found that the pool was a circular one, not suited for aquatic events. Curtis asked him to build a new one with no expense spared, then manage it. Ott accepted. The pool, a grandstand, and a refreshment stand, and even quarters for the manager's family were built to Ott's liking. He staged varied events for each of his shows. Soon, Opelika Pool was becoming the principal attraction spot in the area. Ott always had a fondness for Merrick. When Merrick and Bowman wanted him to direct aquatic sports at the Miami Biltmore Hotel, he accepted. When the hotel was leased to Alfred E. Smith, the late governor of New York and candidate for president, Ott continued to serve as the pool's director. He was again asked to serve when Henry M. Doherty bought the hotel. He accepted. Jackie Ott had always been the star of the shows. Alexander had started him as a swimmer when he was just 11 months old. Stars assembled. Alexander proceeded to gather around him such aquatic stars as Johnny Weissmuller, Pete Desjardins, Eleanor Holmes, Marshall Wayne, Katie Rawls, and others. He hired the Miami Edison cadets as ushers. With the galaxy of stars Ott brought together, the success of his show was immediate. Following his usual custom, he always had something new to offer. Water ballets, name bands, skiing acts, Henry Copinger the Alligator Boy, and even acts from the Ringling Circus. The world's Aquacade, afterward featuring Billy Rose, originated here. And Ott was invited to stage it at the New York's World Fair, but couldn't accept because the New York show would have required $300,000. Publicity for Gables. With an average of between 10 and 15 world swimming records being broken each year, thrilling aquatic stunts going on, the hotel became a favorite haunt for sport writers and newsreel cameramen. These doings brought Coral Gables more publicity than had ever been hoped for. The Ott shows attracted even more attention than those Ott directed at the Venetian pool when, at Ott's suggestion, William Jennings Bryan, the great commoner, used to appear regularly to address the crowds. Sales of property in Coral Gables mounted briskly. Filling stations and other businesses reported that they had more trade on Sundays as a result of the Ott shows than any other day of the week. Jackie, as a result of publicity, became the most widely known boy of his time. He eventually appeared in motion pictures. For the last few years, Alexander has been taking it easy. He is best known as Captain Ott now, for he owns and operates a charter fishing boat, the Shark. As for Jackie, he served in World War II as lieutenant commander in the Navy and has charge of the Miami swimming pools. So that's the end of that first article. Now I'm going to sail through some personal details about Alexander and Grace's one and only child before I anchor into a couple more articles. From the start of his life, he was known by a lot of titles, but the most well-known and my personal favorite nomenclature for this kid and guy was Jackie Ott, the amazing Aqua. Isn't that adorable? I agree. Jack was born June 24th, 1918 in Denver, Colorado. It was widely known that he could swim solo before he learned to walk or talk. And as he grew up, he followed very closely in his parents' footsteps, especially when it came to his career. In his first year of life, Jackie won at least 2 baby beauty contests. I read in a lot of sources it was actually 10, but I could only find the title of 2, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there for everybody to take with a grain of salt. As a toddler, he became known as the world's best, best child swimmer in all America. My bad, I lost my place in my sentence for a second. By age 3, Jackie was already a certified professional swimmer, lifeguard, high diver, live performer, actor, comedian, and daredevil. Okay, I know you can't be really certified as a daredevil at age 3, but hopefully you guys are catching my drift. As the star of the Ott Water Carnivals, Jackie had a lot of very notable stunts at the time, and they included a life-saving demonstration, holding his breath underwater for up to 4 minutes, which in time he would sometimes eat something underwater or pretend to read or something else just wild that doesn't happen underwater. He also dove through rings of fire into the pool. And the stunt that landed him a spot on the big screens was aquaplaning behind a speedboat, which he usually performed at beaches or lakes, but this could be demonstrated on a smaller scale in the pools. And you can expect a picture of that also to go on social media in accompanying this episode. After Jackie began starring in short films being shown in theaters across the U.S., he then landed a role in the 1924 silent film Born Rich as Bugsy Fairfax. I have a picture of that too. Oh, I will be posting the sources of these pictures. Don't worry. You can go check it out because there's more. And I definitely encourage everybody to go check it out because it's so cute. Jackie, as a high diver, personally loved to perform comedy dives, but as a child, he definitely favored a stunt called the Houdini dive. This stunt, he would be bound in ropes, much like the great illusionist Harry Houdini, and would dive from a 25-foot tower into the pool and maneuver his way out of the ropes before resurfacing. Harry Houdini himself attended these shows to watch the toddler and was very impressed from all of my research. So now let's get back into some articles. These next 2 are both from the year 1922, which is the year that Jackie turned 4 years old, and this was a very big year for him. It seems like this is the year that he gained, worldwide fame. This article was originally published in the Miami News of Miami, Florida, May 18th, 1922. Highland Park movie hero now playing at Paramount. Jackie Ott, athlete, 3 years of age, is in a knockout picture showing all this week. Showing at the Paramount Theater today and all the rest of this week are pictures of the Miami scenes, including the movies of little Jackie Ott, famous swimmer and aquatic stunt performer who is now 3.5 years of age. When a reporter was sent to interview this young man, he appeared at the door armed with a gun pointed directly at the reporter and announced in the clearest of the King's English, quote, "I'll shoot you," end quote. Finally, he produced a revolver in addition to his gun, and when the enemy refused to be routed, he went back to playing his blocks with a boy 3 times his own age. Jack prefers playmates several times his own 3 years of age. He tells his family, when they suggest that he play with smaller children, that such children, quote, "talk too foolish," end quote. Furthermore, the children his own age cannot ordinarily keep pace as he sets. Outdoor gym. An outdoor gymnasium has been installed this summer by Mr. Ott at his home in Highland Park. Jack gaily and easily climbs over halfway up the 30-foot rope on a pine tree. About every 10 feet there is a knot in which he nonchalantly swings about until the spirit moves him to go up higher. That rope will keep young Jack busy, however, because as he reaches the tops a few times, his father intends to untie some of the knots and make the climb harder. A trapeze and a horizontal bar, with plenty of soft sand below, are other attractions, and they are no children's height. They are high enough to interest the 10 and 12-year-olds. In much excitement, Jackie called, quote, "Dad, looky here," end quote, when a boy of 10 years swung from his knees, and the little fellow was as delighted over that as a trifling of climbing the rope himself. Deluged with gifts. Jack's freedom from conceit is his highest asset, and the movie men have recognized it and are anxious to take advantage of it. Yet he likes applause. His first taste of it was at age of 2 years, when he took his first prize. It was for a novelty entry in the Denver Stock Show Parade, before a crowd of 8,000 people, when he drove his big St. Bernard around the ring at the head of all other entries. Big publicity for himself and his dog attracted his parents' friends, and the boy was quickly showered with presents, until every day at the stock show parade was a veritable Christmas, and public appearances began to seem good. To this day, when he does well, his father gives him some simple but well-earned award of merit, out of which he gets as much pleasure as from the first deluge of gifts. His mother says he has never been afraid of the public, and in fact, this fact, together with his present lack of conceit, make him a veritable movie star, because directors do not have to depend upon time and tricks to get him into his performances. They do not have to wait upon convenience of his parents to have them on hand for coaxing the child into work. He takes the orders directly from the director. Snaps into it. His father tells of one time at the Royal Palm Hotel when the little chap was reluctant to perform for no particular reason other than a whim. But as soon as his name was announced and the music of applause was heard, Jackie snapped into it and eagerly went through a long list of stunts. Mr. Ott says he does not risk forcing the youngster, for it would sacrifice more than it would gain. Mr. Ott gives commands. Jackie is all there, however. It's good game, and he's ready for it. Short, curt orders in a gentle tone get instant response, sometimes with suggestions from the performer himself. Quote-unquote, "chest out" is a fundamental command, and Jack, with his 2 1/2 inches chest expansion, straightens up and tenses his muscles and is ready for anything that comes next. His coordination of thought and action are a delight to anyone who appreciates muscular control. An awful smack. Aquaplaning, says Mr. Ott, is something that many renowned stunt performers said they would not permit their children to do for $20,000. Jackie Ott, however, was sent to do it for the movies. He took a look at the engine of the speedboat, and then over he went onto the surfboard. The boat started, and the small Jack disappeared into the waters of the bay. Overboard from the boat went his father, calling to the little fellow, whose curly head suddenly appeared above the surface, as he swam to his father, remarking, quote, "I got an awful smack that time," end quote. Awful smacks are not enough to stop him. That is just an incident like stubbing his toe, as he is doing daily now in trying to learn to walk on his hands, a trick he is picking up from his playmates. Mr. Ott's philosophy is that children learn more from each other than from an instructor. What he cannot teach Jackie, his playmates can, and there are constant stunt competitions in progress at the Ott's outdoor gym when the boys come over from school in crowds. Sticks to the kids. As to the movies now showing, Jack's father says it is a knockout, but Jack will not commit himself. Mrs. Ott says he witnessed them at a special showing and seems to take no interest. In fact, she wonders if he realizes yet that they are of himself, for he has made no direct comment on them. Mr. Ott had the film promised for a special showing at the Highland Park School, and when it seemed that there might be some doubt of its being available before the school term closed, he immediately took steps to secure it, for he says, quote, he believes in sticking to the kids, end quote, and he had promised that they should see it. He intends to stick by his own boy and, quote, putting him over big or not at all, end quote. So he is proceeding carefully yet daringly with the education of this young athlete. And that's the end of that article. Next up, this is just a little tiny snippet from a much, much larger article that took up almost a whole page, but I figured we'd cut some of it out and cut a lot of time. So this one focuses on Jackie, and it was originally published in the Miami Herald of Miami, Florida, July 5th, 1922. Jackie Ott amuses. The novel sight of a 3-year-old boy riding an aquaplane surfboard across the pool was furnished by the always popular Jackie Ott. Jackie mounted his surfboard at one end of the pool and a rope which led to the other end and had several strong men fastened to it. Then the signal was given, and the little fellow looked just exactly as he did when riding behind the power boat last winter, his yellow curls flying in the wind and a look of grim determination on his face. Then he provided a real thrill by climbing a big rope which was fastened to the top of the high diving tower, and which was larger around than his little fingers could reach. But he climbed up anyway, and then smiled down at the crowd to show that all this was old stuff to him, and no one but a baby would be afraid. Later, when he had slid to safety, he gave a life-saving exhibition, towing his father from one end of the pool to the other. And then, after Jackie had been boosted up on the side of the pool, he gave his daddy a genuine push that sent him back into the water when he likewise tried to get out. And that is the end of that little snippet. And isn't that so adorable? I wish I could go back in time and seriously see this family in person, because they just sound so cute and entertaining. So in 1925, Jackie was actually involved in a car accident where he was thrown through the windshield of a car. Later, according to his wife, that was actually what ended his time on the big screen. But he kept on performing in water shows, though. When he was 8 years old, and while his family was living in Florida, Jackie, on one of his days off, built himself a makeshift sailboat from things that he found around his home. Then he sailed that little boat down the Miami River and across the Biscayne Bay, and then back home, all by himself. This claim, his mother never believed it, but he held it as truth his whole life. So take that with a grain of salt if you need to. I can't say which one I believe. When he was 9 years old, he became buddies with Johnny Weissmuller. Before Johnny Weissmuller became the star of MGM's Tarzan movie franchise. This was a friendship that actually ended up being lifelong. They stayed friends until Johnny passed away in, I think, 1984, even though Johnny was 14 years older than Jackie. But as that last article stated, he always preferred friends that were much older than him. So jumping forward a little in time, because I think you all are getting the gist of this kid and his wild life. After high school, Jackie attended the University of Miami, where very shortly after graduating, he joined the U.S. Naval Air Force at age 22. He enlisted in October of 1940 and became active duty in August of 1941. And some of you may realize that that was literal months before Japan's surprise attack on American naval bases, which was indeed the move that forced America to join the fight in World War II. Jack was a pilot for the Navy. He quickly moved up ranks while he was there, or enlisted to lieutenant commander. And while stationed in Hawaii, Jack and other professional swimmers who were also enlisted would put on Aqua for their fellow troops, which I think is just so great. Way to make a really crappy situation a lot better for a few moments in time. Jack served 5 years in the Navy, fighting for America in the Pacific before a plane crash sent him home. I believe they called it terminal leave. It was not long after this that he did leave the military and moved back to Miami, Florida, and rejoined his family. This time he brought with him a new bride and a baby girl, which is exciting, but I'm sure was shocking for his parents. So, by the way, I'm not going to release any names from the branches that Jack added to the family tree. I don't want to invade anybody's personal privacy, and although I'm aware of some of them not being around anymore, I'm not even just gonna dip my toe into that water, because unless you people are actually interested in me mentioning your names, in which case contact me. We'll get to that later though. So throughout the rest of his career, Jack would continue to appear in water shows across the nation, and not just his family's shows. He performed for audiences in not only Florida and New York with his parents, but also in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, Hawaii, and Louisiana. Maybe even other states, but these ones are just the ones I was able to confirm. Jack always opted to do comedy diving, as I mentioned before, which earned him the title of the Water Clown in Louisiana, which is also adorable. It was around 1950, let me be clear, when Jack retired from live water shows, and like his father, he started a charter boat business called Ott's Yachts. In his time off, Jack enjoyed competing in sailing contests. He was a fan of fishing and golfing, and like his parents, he also directed a few children's beauty contests over the years. He offered free swimming and diving lessons to kids in the Miami area for almost 3 decades, all while still managing the pools for the city of Miami. In 1955, he helped establish the Dade County Juvenile Olympic Swim Team, and he eventually became the director of said swim team, which was always very successful. After that, Jackie kind of disappeared out of the papers for a while. There was a little bit of mention of him involved in a scandal in the mid-60s, but I never found a conclusion to that, so at most, he was probably fined by the federal government. Now, this last article, we are also jumping forward a little in time. A few articles, I have a bunch of articles of Jack in his adulthood, but I cut a lot of them to, again, save time for you guys, which I waste time talking about, so sorry about that. Maybe I can revisit this incredible family sometime in the future, but today we're going to keep it short and sweet. Almost. This article is one of my favorite, and it was just too cute to pass up. So it was originally published in the Miami Herald of Miami, Florida, March 2nd, 1980. So without further ado, Games Inspire Golden Memories by Mark Rogers, a Herald writer. Claudia Noonan chuckles at the thought of young Jack Ott and his pranks. Noonan recalls vividly the spring of 1934 when her family made its yearly trip from Michigan to Miami to participate in a swim show at the Miami Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. The show, which was directed by Alexander Ott, Jack's father, was featuring stars from Ringling Brothers' Barnum and Bailey Circus. Included in the cast was a tight wire artist, Carl Walenda. Walenda set a wire 25 feet over the pool for his performance. During rehearsal, some of the swimmers in the show decided to try walking the wire with a balance stick. Noonan, then known as 17-year-old Dorothea Eckert, tried the wire too, but young Jack Ott made it tougher on her than she would have liked. Ott, only 15, and the feature diver in the show, shook the wire while Noonan was crossing. She didn't fall, but she came close. Noonan and Ott went their separate ways after that show. Noonan became an international swimming and diving star and participated in the Olympics. Ott remained in his father's shows and became the first diver to do 3.5 somersaults off of a platform. But Saturday, Noonan and Ott were reunited once again. They were at the Tamiami Pool for the Golden Games, a South Florida athletic competition for senior citizens. Though miserable weather kept many participants away, it couldn't dampen the spirits of the entrants. Ott, age 61, outpointed 2 foes in the diving competition and posted the best times in 2 swimming races to take the overall lead. Noonan, age 63 and the only woman entered Saturday, swam in 2 races. The swimming and diving portion of the games will be continued today for competitors who took rain checks on Saturday. Ott's standout performance surprised him. Quote, "I haven't dived for 2 years," he said. Quote, "I wasn't sure how well I would do because I've been out of it for so long. I was just telling some people a while back how I'd like to compete because I didn't think there was anybody my age who could beat me at swimming or diving. I felt a little clumsy and awkward out there, but I had a great time." End quote. Ott, who owns and operates Ott's Yachts, a chartering service to the Bahamas, is a retired City of Miami employee. He ran the city's 8 pools and instructed youngsters for 28 years. Showing just a bit of a gut, Ott was in exceptional shape Saturday. He sports an enviable tan, and his body is still well defined from his weightlifting days. Quote, "I was a little powerhouse back then," end quote. Ott says at age 46, he could still bench press 345 pounds. Today, he occasionally works out with 100 pounds on the bench to stay loose. He stands 5'8" and weighs 175 pounds. I haven't stayed as physically active as I would like," Ott said. Quote, "I do some swimming in my pool at home, but that's about it," end quote. And there was a little bit more to that article, but it wasn't, super important because we are focused on Jackie Ott. And that, Sound Searchers, brings me to the end of the articles for this episode. I hope everybody enjoyed these awesome little stories about this incredible family. Go out there and do some research on your own. I will provide the sources that I got all this information from for this episode in just a moment. If you didn't get to listen to the first episode, however, go check that out because I read a little bit about Jackie's father, Alexander, and these incredible water sports shows. I read off a lot of stuff that actually happened. So go check that out because it was very cool and a lot of fun. Look out for my next episode, guys, because I'm leaving the Florida papers and I don't know, I'm considering a topic that might be a little darker, maybe one that's just weird, who knows, we'll see. I've got a few things in my pocket and I just got to pick which one. So if you would like to find the Old Newspaper Plus, wherever you find your favorite podcast is the place to look. That's with the plus symbol, by the way, for the podcasts. And if you want to find me on social media, I'm on Instagram. Search for the_old_newspaper_plus. That's the word spelt out Or you can search for Court Lorraine, CourtLorraine. That's me. To follow me on Facebook, search at The Old Newspaper Plus. That's all words spelt out, including plus, no spaces. The sources for today's episode, I want to just remind everybody, I am not sponsored. I do not receive any compensation of any kind from these sources that I mentioned. I actually pay a couple of them to get my information. So this is not a plug for any of these companies or websites. I just want to give credit where credit is due. And I also want to let you guys know that if you feel like going out there and reading it yourself, it's there. And here's my sources. FloridaMemory.com, which is free to use. Newspapers.com, which is free for a couple of small searches, but to get the real deep searches, you got to pay a subscription. Ancestry.com also requires a subscription. FamilySearch.org, which is free and very, very helpful. Google, of course, which is free, as we all know. RogueFitness.com, which is free. I also searched the Vault of SportsIllustrated.com. That's SI.com for anybody interested. Those are also free to use. Findagrave.com, which is free and very fascinating. Very cool site. Go check that out too. I also use the website for the Digital Public Library of America, which is free to use. I like to say that. Any sources that I use for my pictures that I post on social media, I will post the sources with the images. So hopefully everybody can go check that stuff out too, because those sites, like I mentioned, have a lot more pictures to look through. I'm just picking my favorites to show everybody. Bring awareness to all these sites. Go check out your memory page for your city, and always support your local libraries, guys, because they have awesome newspapers to look through. Again, thanks everybody for listening to the Old Newspaper Plus podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, and share. I'm Courtney Lorraine, bringing you the old news. Bye.